Hey, what's up, podcast peeps? Glad to have you aboard for another edition of Daily Scone. Thrilled to be here. You know what, man? I'm super grateful and a little surprised. I keep asking for feedback on this podcast, and admittedly, at this point, still very raw. I'm not even 40 episodes in, and I really thought that this was, and so I'm not like 100% full bore pushing promotion behind this because I want to refine it and really get into a groove where I know what people are interested in hearing about. And really my thought going into this was going to be aspiring broadcasters would get into it, or maybe people in the media industry would use this sort of as a place to share ideas and come on board. And there's certainly been that, but more so I would say the feedback I've gotten has been from people who aren't in the media, who just find this interesting or have found it applicable to their business, be it sales or whatever you do. So, I'm really grateful for that, man. And I really firmly believe that no matter what you do professionally, like, humility is so key, and it's humbling yourself to recognize that, and it's recognizing that, man, sometimes you don't have all the answers, and being willing to take suggestion and advice and direction. I'd like to think that's something that's helped me a lot, is that, I'll ask questions of people who know more than me to try to get information, and I rarely ever would take any type of constructive criticism as an insult. I would never internalize it. I would just try to learn from it and be better from it. So anyway, my point is, with all that, I don't really know if that's relevant to any of you, but the point is, for everyone who's providing feedback, thank you. Very, very much. I appreciate it. So, not the point of today's podcast, man. If you missed it today, Friday edition of After Further Review, at 5 o'clock today, Heart of Drive Time, we had a Jordy Culotta on with us, who, if you're not familiar with our show or our station, my show is an afternoon drive on ESPN Radio in Baton Rouge. We're syndicated on ESPN Radio in New Orleans and regionally on Cox Sports Television. Well, our station's morning show, Off the Bench with Jordy Culotta and T-Bob Hebert, we announced today that the Off the Bench is joining us in syndication on 100.3 ESPN New Orleans, and I am so fired up about this, like, for so many reasons. Like, first and foremost, I'm just super happy for Jordy and T-Bob. Like, and in particular, I don't want to exclude T-Bob, but in particular Jordy, and I want to really single him out for a second, because I hope people understand how difficult it is whenever you're a tandem show and you rotate co-hosts. Because, like, it is, I know I've said this before, but, like, it is the hardest thing in the world to do is, in any type of broadcast, is find chemistry. And when you have it, it's gold. And any time you have a tandem show and you change part of that tandem, it's impossible not to affect the chemistry. Like, the show is just going to alter. Like, I'm a solo show, and any time my producer changes, the show changes inherently. I've had Cade Wassan and James Harrelson and Carly McCord and Chad Laborde and now Brian Haldane. I've had 5 producers on AFR, and every time the producers changed, just the feel of the show has changed. Even more so when you have to change co-hosts. So Jordy, had Derek with him, Derek Panamsky initially. Derek left radio to go be on Ed Ogeron's staff at LSU. Hunt Palmer, in a pinch, filled in a big way and did an awesome job when Derek left abruptly to join Ed Ogeron's staff when Ed became the interim head coach and then the full-time head coach. And now T-Bob Hebert, of course, who worked with Jordy a while back before OTB was the morning show at the time. I guess it was Culotta and the Prince. When Off the Bench was like a weeknight staple, a couple of nights a week, like maybe Mondays and Wednesdays, Jordy and T-Bob did that show then for a little while before T-Bob went to New Orleans. Anyway, my point is, like, it's not easy to have that type of turnover with your co-host and maintain the same level of success. But that show, the morning show, has maintained that, not only maintained, but continued to grow in popularity. And I mean, Jordy has been the consistent. And that I hope you don't misunderstand. Like, that's not to take away from any of the other co-hosts, and obviously T-Bob right now, who works so hard. But it's just like Jordy has been the consistent. the consistent pillar in that show, and through a lot of the turnover, he's kept the ship sailing in the right direction to the point where it is now, where I mean it's a bona fide staple in our market, and now is going into syndication. And like Jordy came on the show today earlier, and he came on my show and made the announcement. That was, by the way, that was a directive from Gordy, and my guess is the reason that they said, hey, make the announcement on AFR was because AFR is already on in New Orleans, so it was sort of it was an announcement to the New Orleans market, hey, this is coming. So I guess it does make sense, instead of making the announcement on OTB, to make it in the afternoon. But Jordy came on, and when he was, that's where I was going with this. When he came on AFR and he made the announcement, he sort of tongue in cheek made the, hey man, riding coattails into New Orleans, like. But and Jordy and I have that kind of relationship where we can joke. But like the truth is, AFR has been in New Orleans for 2.5 years, but the truth is, like, if that show wasn't good, it wouldn't have been desirable. So it's irrelevant. And I know he was joking, but that's my sincere hope, is that people understand, like, the amount of work that they've put into that show, when it was Jordy and Derek, when it was Jordy and Hunt, now Jordy and T-Bob. And I'll single out Jordy again because I've just seen that for as long as I've worked at Guarantee. I think I've told this story maybe in a previous podcast, but like when they hired me to do afternoons at ESPN at Guarantee at ESPN Baton Rouge, I was there for like 2 weeks, and Jordy started blowing me up. He's like, "Hey man, you got to get me in the door. You got to get me in the door. What can I do?" I'm like, "Bro, I just got here. Like, I'm trying to figure out what to do." And I don't know, but like he was so persistent that Charles Hannegriff and I know I've told this before, but started calling him Stalker. Like, we called him Stalker Culotta. That was his nickname, because it was just like an incessant hammering. And honestly, like, that's the lesson that I tell aspiring broadcasters all the time. Like, you have got to be persistent. Don't let people forget about you. Like, I'll have people sometimes email, like, students will email me and say, hey, how do I get in there and do what you do? I say, well, Cade Wassan is our ops manager and the program director for ESPN Baton Rouge. Here's his email. Email and tell him you're interested. Well, let's send him an email, and a month later, they might say, hey, I never heard back from Cade. Well, like, you sent him one email randomly. The guy's the ops manager over 4 stations and the program director of ESPN Baton Rouge. Like, you got to be persistent. So, like, Jordy was, it still is, but like hyper persistent and just aggressive. And it's like, look what it's done. He's got a highly rated morning talk show, a major day part, successful in sales as well. Now he's going into syndication. Like, it's a great lesson, man, that you go bust your ass and you get aggressive and you don't let people forget you. When you get that opportunity, don't take it lightly. Kick the damn door in, And when Jordy was starting, like, when he was doing off the bench, he was doing like a Monday night from 6 to 8 or 6 to 7. And then Monday became Monday, Wednesday. And then it was like, okay, when can I host the Tiger Zone? And it was like, just get those opportunities, kick ass, and then get the day part. And when morning started cooking, it was like, okay, well, now how do we go into syndication too? And he eyed that for a long time, man. And it's so much of that is making it work because, contractually, obviously you've got to have both ESPN Baton Rouge and Guarantee, and then KLRZ 100.3 ESPN New Orleans work out contractually how to make it work. But also, if you're an ESPN affiliate, you're contracted by ESPN to carry so many hours of national programming in the prime daytime hours, so like 5 a.m. to 7 p.m. So you have to sort of wait for an opportunity to pick the spot to get in and fill that day part. And the other thing, I know that was a hindrance, a couple other things that were a hindrance. One, when T-Bob came to ESPN Baton Rouge, he had a non-compete in New Orleans because he had been working in New Orleans, so that had to expire. That's one. But two, when Mike and Mike were together, ESPN National required all NFL markets to carry Mike and Mike in full. So because New Orleans obviously is an NFL market, ESPN New Orleans had to carry Mike and Mike in full. And with Mike and Mike breaking up, and now it's becoming Golick and Wingo, I think that was kind of an entry point to say, hey, can we test getting a local show in this market? And a lot of due diligence from all parties involved or how and why that this has come about. So it's just back to my point, man. Like, I feel so good for Jordy and T-Bob, because it's like it's an awesome opportunity. It's evidence. It's evidence of the growth of their show, the popularity of their show. It's a I hate to use the word reward, because I don't know if that's the right word, but I think if I use it, you'll know what I mean. Like, it's a reward for their hard work and the success that they've had, but it's really it's an opportunity to continue growth and expansion. And I know I talked a lot about Jordy, just because, like, Jordy and I have worked together for so long, and T-Bob was here, left, and then now, he's been back for, a little more than a year now. But, like, I think, sometimes, T-Bob fills the role of, like, the big personality, and I don't want to say like the black hat or the heel, because that's not really what he does, but he's sort of like the one-off guy, the character. But I think what's lost amid a lot of that is how hard he worked, and it's evident whenever you start to look into some of the stat dissection he does, putting together and thought behind bits. Like, one of the things, I told him this last year, one of the things that he did that was so impressive is on Fridays before the football season, he did the Swamp Prince bit at the end of the 7:00 hour. And if you didn't hear it, he basically did a Game of Thrones sort of parody with an LSU theme, where Ed Ogeron was the Swamp Prince or the Swamp King, and there was the Dark Lord or the Crimson Lord, Saban, and anyway, he wrote it like it was a Game of Thrones trailer, and delivered it as such, like he could, and it became a staple, where, like, even it's capitalizing on the uber popular. It was a great idea, because, like, it capitalized on the uber popularity of Game of Thrones. It was a fun way to preview the weekend coming up in college football, certainly with LSU, whoever they were playing that week, and sort of like making it a season-long bit. Like, it was a really brilliantly done and thought out and executed bit. And I told him, I said, man, look, you've done something that is not easy to do, which is, like, create a staple in radio today that becomes appointment listening, where people will make sure they're in their car. Not, oh, I'll go listen to it on podcast later. Like, I want to hear it now when it's live. And that's a hard thing to do in the digital age. It's like damn near impossible to do in the digital age. And he did it with that bit. But, like, that's the type of stuff and the element that he brings. It's so different, because they're just, like, there isn't another T-Bob in this market, or probably in our state. So, man, anyway, like, I'm so happy for those guys to have the opportunity. But, like, selfishly, I will tell you, very selfishly, I'm thrilled that there's going to be a local morning show on KLRZ 100.3 ESPN New Orleans. Just like nerddom radio formatics, it's morning and afternoon drive tend to have this sort of symbiotic relationship. And it's one of those, the saying, like, a rising tide, lifts all boats. If you have a great, strong afternoon drive radio show, people are listening when they're driving home, they get out of their cars, they go in, they have dinner, they spend the evening with their family, they go to sleep, they get in the car in the morning, they turn on the car, what are they listening to? Well, they're listening to the same station they were listening to on the drive home. So now when they get in their car, it'll be Jordy and T-Bob. Now they listen to that instead of changing the channel from a national show to something else. Now they're listening to Jordy and T-Bob. So when they get to work, they go into work, turn off their car. They go into work. When the day's over, they come back in their car. They turn it on. What's there? Hi, it's me. So by default, a lot of people that weren't listening to 100.3 ESPN New Orleans before will now, and are more likely to catch my show, and vice versa. People that are listening to me in the afternoon are more likely to stay in the morning on 100.3 and be there in the afternoon when I'm on, when they get back in their car. So it's like we're pulling the rope together. You know what I mean? Like, it'll help them that I'm on in afternoons, but it's going to help me a shitload that there's a local morning show. And obviously Gus Cattengill is on middays in the lunch hour, so now 100.3, and Gus does a great job, and so and he's based in New Orleans, so he's going to add more of that authentic New Orleans angles and flares to all the topics. But it's like now morning drive, lunch hour, and afternoon drive are all local programming, and that is going to make the station stronger and more powerful. And I'm so proud. Like in a very clear moment of candor, not that I ever lie to you, but like I am very, very I very rarely ever talk about ratings because number one, legally there's a lot of gray area what you can talk about, but also like it's not always super important. But when AFR started on 100.3 ESPN New Orleans 2.5 years ago, so like some of the market share that I saw like was in the 40s, like of registered diary entries, like low. The station wasn't performing great at the time. It just wasn't. And I'm very proud that we bumped up into like top 10 in certain demographics. So it's like in 2.5 years it's been a climb, but like it's worked. Like we've gotten a great response and we have a great audience in New Orleans. And now like when you're bookending the day with local morning, local afternoon drive, and you got Gus in the midday, now the station becomes like it's like think of it like if you're riding around on a tricycle and you have one flat tire. Well, two of those tires are going really good, but man, they're pulling a lot of weight, and you're never really going to meet your max potential until you pump up that third tire. Well, now you've done it, and now it's like that thing can cook, and I'm so fired up to see how it just continues to grow and develop. And I'm just, Mr. Jerry Gisclair, who owns KLRZ 100.3 ESPN New Orleans, like I'm so glad to be partnered with him because he had the vision to say, hey, I like your show. I want to carry that. And I like the morning show too. Like I want to carry that. And like to say, hey, how like be patient and not reactionary, just be patient, wait for the right opportunity to make that happen and be persistent as well. And it's gonna work. And it's so fun to be a part of, man. So anyway, this is I'm probably gone. I don't know if this is too long or if this is something that you all find interesting, but the long story short is if you live in New Orleans or you know someone who does, tell them they now have an appointment starting July the 9th. So a week from Monday, July the 9th, they have an appointment from 7 to 9 a.m. And that's off the bench with Jordy, Culotta, and T-Bob Hebert. They bust ass. They hustle great guests. Jordy is like literally the best I've ever seen at hustling to get great guests. By the way, Jordy joined me on this podcast like a few episodes back. Go back and listen to it if you missed it. And we talked about that, like him coming up, and being persistent the way he was, and then also booking guests and also like preparing for a morning show. So anyway, go back and listen to that. But like if you're in New Orleans now, you have an appointment every weekday morning, 7 to 9 a.m., starting July 9th, off the bench with Jordy and T-Bob. And I'm like so happy. You can tell, like, I'm sure I've said it a million times. I'm so happy for them. And I'm selfishly very thrilled that it's just going to keep growing KLRZ and just solidify all of us as we continue to grow. So I'm pumped up for them. So shout those guys out on Twitter at TBob53 and at Jordy Culotta. Give them a shout out, an attaboy, a congrats. And man, be sure you're tuning in. 100.3 FM ESPN New Orleans, starting July 9th from 7 to 9 a.m. All right, y'all have a great morning, afternoon, evening, night, whatever it is, whenever it is that you're listening to this. Thrilled that you're here on Daily Scone. Thanks so much as always. Please send me feedback. MattMoscona@gmail.com. Matt Moscona, Moscona, at gmail.com. And do me a favor, please. I ask you this all the time. Please share this. Pass it on. If you think someone might find this interesting, send them, email them or text them a link. Hit the share button on Facebook or the retweet button on Twitter. It's just I need feedback, so I need to know, so I know what avenues to continue pursuing with this. I'm thrilled doing it. I love doing it, but I want to make sure also. It's like if someone drops you in a pool and they're like, "All right, swim with your eyes closed." All right, well, it's helpful if I'm pointed in the right direction. I have goggles on, and my eyes are open, so I could swim in that right direction instead of just like swimming, but you don't really know. It's just sort of arbitrary. So anyway. That was random. I apologize. So anyway, give me feedback, please. I love it. Y'all have a great night. See ya. Morning, Daily Scone.